Welcome to the From the Shadows podcast. I am your host, Shane Grove. And before we get started with this week's episode, I just want to remind everybody that if you want to check out all things From the Shadows, head to our website, fromtheshadowspodcast.com. There's links to all of our social media, including TikTok, our Patreon page, everything. You can go check out, follow us on social media, see all the cool stuff that our social media queen Nita posts up there every day, and all the interaction that goes on. And if you want to follow me or get a hold of me, you can get a hold of me at Shane Grove Author on Instagram. Send me a message. Or if you have a experience that you want to come on the show and share with our listeners, on that website, there's a contact button, and you can send me an email. I promise I'll read it. I'll get back to you. And you can come on the show and tell us about your experience. Or if you just want to get on there and send me a complaint, I'll read that too, because I get plenty of those. I get plenty of complaints. So with that being said, I also need to remind everybody that we're going to be at Monster Fest 2 in Canton, Ohio, put on by Small Town Monsters. We are going to be recording an episode live that will be our 500th episode of the From the Shadows podcast. So it won't come out right away because we're still got a couple weeks before that magic number comes up, but we will be doing an episode live. And if you're in the Pennsylvania, Ohio area and you're going to come to Monster Fest 2 and you have a really cool story you haven't told before, get a hold of me and you can be our guest live there at Monster Fest 2. So it should be a lot of fun. There's a lot of really cool other podcasters there, including Jim Harold from the Paranormal podcast. I mean, who doesn't love Jim Harold? I mean, that guy's been doing it forever and doing it great. So with that being said, go check them out at Small Town Monsters, Monster Fest 2. Get tickets to the premiere of their new movie on Friday night, and then come hang out with us the next day. So with that being said, though, I want to welcome Frank from Kentucky to the From the Shadows podcast. Frank, thanks for hanging out with me.
How you doing?
I'm doing. It's a Sunday afternoon. I should be, glad I'm not still out cutting grass or something. So,
yeah.
So,
we haven't been able to do much grass cutting with all the rain, so.
Oh yeah. Well, lucky us. Lucky us then. Lucky us. So Frank, tell our listeners your kind of like some of your experiences have led you down this path to doing some of your own research and investigation on the subject of Bigfoot. Like how do you get into that? I mean, I can imagine in Kentucky, it's probably pretty squatchy in a lot of places.
Yeah, it's pretty easy too. I mean, I kind of grew up, I've seen, I watched pretty much like everybody else, I've watched all the Finding Bigfoots, and I've seen the $6 Million Man, and I was telling you about MacGyver. There was an episode of MacGyver that had Bigfoot on it, and I grew up and I've seen Harry and the Hendersons as a kid, and I've always been fascinated with the subject. I've seen stuff of Patty and all that stuff, and I've just always been curious about, the unexpected and stuff that's out there. And it's kind of weird. About 4 years ago, I guess, I happened to run into, he so happens to be my pastor now, but he was doing he's been doing Bigfoot research for Charlie Raymond and the Kentucky Bigfoot Research Organization. And he's like his lead investigator for Western Kentucky. And I just happened to run into him and started talking to him. And I went out with him once or twice, and I end up, me and him really clicked and everything. And it just so happens, he's now my pastor of my church that I go to. And so, like I said, I've been interested in the thing for a long time now. And I just happened to, like I said, run into him and kind of got me more curious about it and everything. And I'm a truck driver, and I do a lot of most of my deliveries and pickups and stuff is Southern Illinois, Southern Indiana, and Western Kentucky. So, and I'm home every day and everything. So I was out making a pickup one day. It was in 2021. I was going to pick up this like party tent like they use for weddings and stuff. It was at an Amish place with the ones that make it and everything. And I was on my way out there and kind of got, I was on a road we really shouldn't have been on in a semi, and I had to backtrack about a mile or so. And I went out there and I got everything picked up and everything. And then I was talking to them and like, how do I get back to, Murfreesboro, Tennessee, or Murfreesboro, Illinois? I'm like, I'm not from around here. And he's like, just go up the gravel road and turn on the first blacktop. And he said, it'll take you right into town. So I was like, okay. So I happened to be driving back through there, and it was the summertime. It was pretty hot. I'm wanting to say with the heat index and everything, it was roughly about 104, 105 degrees with the heat index. And I know the AC in my truck couldn't keep up. And I was driving along, going up that road, and this road was pretty straight for a long way. And then it started getting kind of hilly. And on the left side of the road was pretty much all woods. And then on the right side was probably 90% woods. And then there was a couple of cow pastures and a few like cornfields and stuff. And I crossed over a creek, and up in front of me, probably around 600 or 700 yards or so, I seen this dark figure come from the left side of the road, crossed over in front of me to the right. And I was going down the hill, and I'm like, I'm coming up on it pretty quick, So I'm like, well, I better slow down or I'll end up hitting whoever it is, because so I started slowing down, and I went down the hill and popped up over the hill, and like it was gone. It wasn't there. And I'm like, well, that's kind of odd, because I figured maybe somebody was getting their mail or something like that. Well, on the left-hand side of the road, it was all, like I said, it was all woods over there. And on the right-hand side, it was cornfields. And I'd say the corn was probably close to 6 foot tall, probably 5.5, 6 foot tall. Pretty tall corn, for that time of year. Usually it's not quite that tall yet, but it was kind of tall there. And I started thinking, I was like, who in the right mind would be coming out of the woods, and they were wearing, look like, long sleeves, because, you could pretty much tell when someone is wearing clothes and stuff. You can see the outline breakups of the different colors of the clothes, and you can see where their skin starts and all this stuff here. And I'm like, who in their right mind would be wearing long sleeves, 95 degrees with 100 and something heat index? Who would be walking into a cornfield at this time of year, And the more I thought about it, I was just like, this just didn't add up to me. So I happened to talk to my pastor about it, and he's like, he asked where it was at and everything. And I told him, and he's like, well, I'll get on the site and see if, anybody's got any sightings and stuff reported there. So I was like, all right. So I was sitting on the phone with him, and he started looking up, and he got on he got up on the BFRO's website. And I can't remember exactly what county that was, but it was Murfreesboro, Illinois. But that county where Murfreesboro was at, there was no reportings in that county. But every county around it all had sightings and reportings. And I figured probably why you don't have a whole lot of reportings there is because a lot of the people there are Amish. So yeah, that would be a good reason why there ain't no reports coming out of that area. Mm-hmm. And a couple of days later, I actually went back in that same area, and I stopped over there, and I got out and looked around, and there was a creek and stuff that went along there. And then, like I said, I went up through there and I looked around and looked for trails and stuff, like game trails and stuff like that. And I really didn't see any game trails or anything. I mean, it was pretty thick on the left-hand side of the woods. It was pretty thick. And I walked up along the road there and looked around and seen if I could find any footprints or anything, and really didn't see anything. So, and the more I thought about it, just the way it happened, it was so fast. I mean, literally it was like, like a step and a half, and it was across the road. And I'm like, well, they're moving along at a pretty good click, So I was like, you're probably trying to get off the road, So, like I said, I went up there and looked, and I never did. Like I said, I never did find exactly where it could have crossed at. But like I said, it went into the cornfield, and I never did see it again. So, can I say 100% that it's what it was? No, but I can't really think of anybody that would be, as hot as it is, would be wearing all black, coming out of the woods, going into a cornfield, because I'm sure you as a kid played in cornfields too, and it wasn't really very good. Between itching and sweating, and it just wasn't good.
To be honest though, the only way you'd want to go into the cornfield if you were dressed that heavy, so you didn't get all cut up. but it still wouldn't make any sense to
And then
go.
the thing is too, the thing is too, even the head and the neck and everything, it was all equal color. I mean, it was the same color. It was, the whole, it was like it had a complete bodysuit on. So, it was, like I said, I didn't see any color outlines. It was all the same color. It was all the whole body looked like it was the same color. So, that's what kind of threw me, so I can't say 100% that's what it was, but I'm pretty sure it's probably what it was. I mean, like I said, it was about 700 yards away, 700 yards away, and it was pretty good size. I mean, I could see it very, very plain, you know. So I mean, it was fairly good size. It was, at least over 6 foot or better, because like I said, I seen it clear as day. So it was kind of odd to me. And
Now you said so. Did you were you able to get a comparison to the cornfield? Because you said the cornfield you thought was six and a
yeah,
half foot. I mean,
yeah,
was it
the corn,
noticeably bigger than the
yeah,
cornfield?
it stood up above the corn. It was probably, I'd say a good, oh, 10 or 12 inches, maybe 13 inches taller than the corn. So I'd say it was right about 7 foot, maybe a little bit over 7 foot would be my guess.
Well, and then when you start adding that stuff up, and then you say, okay, if it was a person, the person was
Pretty
seven,
good size.
7.5 feet tall.
Seven,
It
yeah,
starts eliminating the possibilities of
exactly.
who it could be as a person. And
Yeah,
I'm a terrible judge at distance when it comes to that. And when people say, okay, I saw something from even 300 yards away, like I can imagine 100 yards, because
yeah,
believe it or not, I used to be able to run 100 yards, but I can't even, but so I'm always, especially out on my mail route. Okay. I'm always
yeah,
like looking down the street, trying to imagine, how far, like there's a railroad crossing on my route and it's a couple blocks away, but I really don't have any concept of how many yards that is,
yeah,
you know? I'm like, okay, could I see that? So it always amazes me that people are able to see and give good descriptions, because I really don't
mhm,
know how far 600 yards is
yeah,
away, you know?
yeah. It's something that you get used to. It's like, because um, like I said, I'm a truck driver, so you're always trying to keep ahead. You're always trying to watch ahead of you. Especially like if you're
Mhm.
following traffic, you kind of count out time, about how fast you're moving, and about how far you're moving by the time it takes you to get to one spot or another. So you kind of pick up on stuff like that. And I was in the military for 6 years, so I mean, and then I've done hunting, pretty much up until I was coming out of high school. Me and my dad used to hunt and stuff, so I mean, deer hunt and everything. So I'm kind of used to, distance to an extent. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
pretty close. I can get within probably, 25, 30 yards, probably a guessing. I'm fairly
Wow.
fairly fairly accurate.
Yeah, that
But
that amazes me. I wish I could, because I got no clue. You know what I'm saying? I'm looking out my yard, the window here in my yard. And I'm like, I don't even know how far it is to that pine tree. Like is that 100 yards? But so so before we get to the next part here, I do want to ask you about your pastor, and so how does how does your pastor reconcile with the existence of Bigfoot? Okay, what's his thoughts on it, on what it is? Because there's a lot of different theories about, it being something spoken about in the Bible, or
yeah.
it's spiritual, or it's alien, or it's just a flesh and blood creature. What's his thoughts on that?
Well, he feels pretty much that it's a flesh and blood creature. It was created by God, and we don't know if it's closer to human or if it's closer to ape or whatnot. But he always told me, like, if he ever gets to where he thinks that it might be demonic or something like that, that he would probably quit Bigfooting. But right now, as of right now, he's pretty convinced that it's a flesh and blood creature. Um, you always hear people talk about cloaking and how they disappear and all that stuff. I can't say I can't say that that's not true. I don't know. I've never seen anything like that, but I do know how camouflage works and how movement works. If you're not moving, or if something could be standing right in front of you in plain sight and you not see it if it don't move. And it could be wearing bright colors and you don't even really pay attention to it, because that's probably one of the first things your body sees. And you learn that in the military. They're talking about all the different camouflages and stuff of why that they haven't switched camouflage in so long. It's because the first thing that your body sees is movement. After you see movement, then you start seeing shapes, and then eventually you'll start seeing like heights, shapes, heights, and then you'll see color. Color is one of the last things your body actually recognizes. You're going to see first the movement, and then you'll start seeing shapes, and then you'll see the color. So that's the reason why that the military hasn't changed camouflage. It's it's effective the way it is. So I know a few years ago they did do that digital camo stuff, but honestly, I don't think it's any better with the digital camo than it was the other camos they had before. But that's one of the things that we were taught in the military. That's the first thing you see is movement. That's the reason why you see snipers. It takes them a day to go across a 100-yard field. They'll crawl very little at one time. They might move an inch and sit there for an hour before they move another inch. So, but we've done, like, I forgot what the actual term for it is, but we've watched videos of like different camouflage of animals. Like, you see there's like 100 mountain goats on the side of this mountain, and you don't see nothing because they're not moving. And you're like, what do you see there? And you look at it and you're like, well, I don't see nothing. All of a sudden you turn it on, you see them all move at once. You're like, oh wow, I didn't see all that. Same thing with giraffes and lions and tigers in the woods and stuff. Where they're at. Usually they're pretty adapted to that area for camouflage. So you get like tigers and stuff like that. Their color is where they're at. Their color fits in perfectly. So it's good camouflage. So you really don't see them until it's too late. And I'm pretty sure that's probably the way it is with Bigfoot too. It's just they're well adapted to their surroundings. That's like us as a people, we've gotten really relaxed because technology has made us lazy. Most people nowadays, if you put them out in the woods for a month, they're gonna die. You got very few people that know how to survive anymore. And used to, back our ancestors and all that stuff back, and like the Native Americans, all that stuff, they knew the land, they survived on the land. And now we've come so used to technology that we use technology way too much, and our bodies have gotten weak, and like I said, we don't take up from where we used to be. So they haven't changed. They don't have technology, so they're very good at what they do. And there's a lot of people, you'll hear a lot of people say that they're the ninjas of the woods, and they really are. I mean, they're very, very quick. I've heard stories of them chasing down deer, and I've heard stories of them running next to cars 35, 40 mile an hour. So, I mean, they're just well adapted for what they do, and that's how they stay hid. And, you always hear everybody say, well, why don't we have trail cam pictures? We do have some kind of pictures, but everybody's like, oh, it's fake. It's fake.
Yeah.
And then they say, well, why didn't we found skeletons? Okay. That's a good question. A lot of people wonder that. You take a dead deer and put it on the side of the road, within a month, that deer's completely gone. There ain't no bones left. Everything scavenged it between the animals and just like the bugs and just the world taking care of itself. If you go out into the woods, how many hunters actually find dead bear carcasses? Not very many. I mean, it has happened, but it don't happen very often. And the reason why is because us as people, we don't get off the beaten path. If there's a trail, yeah, we've been on the trail, but for the most part, people as a whole don't tend to wander off the trails. If you get a couple, 2 or 3 miles off a trail, you're doing really good. And you get into like a big set of woods, you've got hundreds of thousands of acres. Us as people, we haven't got hardly, we ain't even broke a third of a percent of the actual trails to even know what's out there. So, I have a feeling, that's pretty much why we haven't found a body, and we've heard, every Native American culture has got these things in their stories. And, there's some of the stories that said that they used to actually, I've heard of some of the stories where they actually somewhat communicated with them. So,
Mm-hmm.
So they know that they're around, they know that they're real. And there's just been so many sightings that, I'd say, if you have 10,000 sightings, out of 10,000 sightings, at least one or two of them's got to be real. I mean, there's not going to be 10,000 liars.
Or
to us.
or misidentifications,
Yeah. So, I mean, out of 10,000, out of 10,000 sightings, I can't say that every one of them would be a liar. I mean, some people might embellish and make it more than what it really was, but to be 10,000 liars, I don't see that happening. So that's another reason why I know for a fact that, they're here. And, I've been doing my own research and stuff. I try to, everything that I see, I always try to debunk myself. I try to basically, even if I think in the bottom of my mind that I know it's a Bigfoot, I try to like take it out of the equation. I try to make it not be true. And then you eventually get to where, it's like, well, there ain't nothing else it could be.
Yeah.
So, and that's the way I've always been. There's a lot of people that, has Bigfoot on the brain. Everything's Bigfoot. So I try to debunk a lot of that stuff. And,
so back to your pastor, is there a certain part of the Bible that he thinks talks about Bigfoot, or is just in another name? Because I mean, there's different, like I said, there's different theories that,
I've heard of Nephilim. Like I've heard that people say that they might be Nephilim and stuff like that. But at the same time, whenever we had the Great Flood, and that's what he said too, we had the Great Flood. And that's the reason why the Nephilim and all that stuff was wiped out. God was basically clearing off the earth to restart and get rid of all the abominations and stuff. And no, he just basically thinks that it's a flesh and blood creature. So it was actually, he figures that it was on the ark. There was some on the ark. So, and that's just like, a lot of people, some of these stories change. That's like a lot of people say, well, what about a unicorn? Unicorns ain't real. Actually, technically, yes, they are real. But if you look at it, the unicorn as you see today is a horse. That only come out about 200 years ago or so. So this is people that did this. If you go back and look in Latin terms, a unicorn is actually a one-horned rhinoceros.
Really?
A unicorn? Yes. It's if you look up the Latin name for a unicorn, you look up rhinoceros. A unicorn is a single-horned rhinoceros, and you got that, and you also have bicornus, which is the two-horned rhinoceros. So technically in the Bible talks about unicorns, even in the Bible. And if you go back through there and actually look up the Latin term for it, like I said, if you look up rhinoceros, the Latin name of it is actually, it's got unicorn in it. You got the single one, and you got the bicornus, which is the two-horned unicorn. So there's things in the Bible that talk about that. So
it's just over the years, it's got
people have changed stuff up. Yeah, it's like people just people embellish, and it's like the Loch Ness monster, and this thing was 1,000 foot long, and it just changes. You put 10 people together, and you tell one person one thing, and you tell him to tell the next person. By the time it gets to the last person,
the game of telephone,
it's changed.
Yeah.
So so over the years, it's just the stories have changed. But like I said, if you go back and look at through all the Native Americans, they've in all pretty much every Native American culture, they've got something that goes along the lines of Bigfoot. They call it different names. Different places have different names for them, and like the Omaha Indian and stuff, Bigfoot is called Satonga, and you got Sasquatch and you got Bigfoot, which is what we started pretty much. But I mean, if you look through the history, even all the way back until like Daniel Boone, Daniel Boone supposedly killed one back in the day, himself. So, I mean, I just think that, like I said, like he was saying, I kind of agree with my pastor. I think it's pretty much it's a flesh and blood creature, and it's like I said, it's just very good at hiding. It knows people. It's watched us over the years. It knows, that usually people mean no good, so they kind of stay away from us,
And the story of Daniel Boone, I mean, they weren't making that up to sell the Weekly World News at the checkout counter. You know what I'm saying? You
Yeah.
know
Oh
what I'm
yeah.
saying? I mean,
Yeah.
those are guys who, you know, told, settled the wildest parts of what became America, you
Oh
know.
yeah.
And, I don't think they were just messing around.
Yeah. It's like even the Vikings. There's stories of the Vikings that even talked about when the Vikings come over here. However many thousands of years, probably before Christopher Columbus supposedly ever reached the Americas. Back in the Vikings even talked about big hairy creatures. So it's like
Did they
it
really? I've never
yeah,
heard.
yeah. There's actually been stories of even like uh, that they've even talked about stuff, being very unusual, big creatures, and pretty much, that's where you get like a big hairy man and stuff like that. So it's always fascinated me with the whole subject and the whole, like I said, it's really kept me up on it. I don't get to go out near as much as I like to, um, but I definitely every chance I get to go out. I go out, and I just recently here bought a thermal, so hopefully I'll be able to maybe get some good footage with the thermal at one of these days. So
I definitely I want you to share because, like I said, I know you've been doing a lot, going out and doing some stuff, but I want you to share with our listeners the story that you shared with me the other day, so they can also see how crazy you are for asking for asking because in my book you were asking for trouble. So
well, 99% of the time I always have somebody with me. Um, but my pastor, he had something to do. One of the other guys I go with, he had something to go. He had something to do. My fiance, she was busy that day, so she wasn't able to go. So I'm like, you know what? I'm still going. So I got all my stuff together Friday after I got off work, and I went down to Land Between the Lakes down in Kentucky, and I got there about 10 o'clock at night. I got my tent set up and everything, and the way that we normally go, one of the places that we normally go while we're down there, I noticed there were signs up, and I didn't really get to see what they said that night. So the next morning, I actually got out. It was too late. I wasn't about to, do any Bigfoot or whatever. So I just stayed around the campfire Friday night. But Saturday morning, I got up early, went and did some fishing, and then I went over to the trail, one of the roads that we go down, and it was actually closed for turkey season. Is what it was. That's the
oh,
reason why
that's
they
it.
had closed.
Okay.
So you could actually go down that road, but you had to do it by foot. You couldn't drive your truck down it. And probably from the road that I go in, where we normally go, is probably a mile or 2 miles driving. As the bird flies, it probably ain't about a mile maybe. You'll go through there and you'll cross a couple little creeks and stuff, and sometimes they're dry, sometimes they've got water in them. But I was trying to figure out how to get there, so I put it in on my maps and let it take me over there, and it actually took me in another way, and it actually brought me in the back way. And one of the place I was actually going to go that night was actually an old cemetery that's there, and we've had some stuff that's went on there before too. I'll tell you that story about that here in a little while. There was like 7 of us in that group, and we had some interesting stuff happen. But the night that I was talking to you about, basically, is I went back to the cemetery, and I didn't realize, like, when we went down there, we walked the whole way down to the cemetery, and I drove my truck down through there, and I was like dragging limbs and everything else going down in there, and I'm like, I don't think I really want to be down here by myself at night. So I'm like, I'm gonna stay up on the road, which is where uh, at the road up ahead, there's like a T intersection, and there was actually a Class A sighting through the KBRO there, and Charlie took the actual report there. So I drove back there, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not gonna be back here at night by myself. I said, if I have to get out of there in a hurry, I'm gonna end up wrecking my truck trying to get up out of here. I'm gonna, lose a mirror and telling what end up in a big ditch or something. So I end up staying up on the actual highway, and last year, like I said, the 7 of us were there at about the same time, and we had some stuff that happened right away. As soon as we got there, we heard whistles, we heard a whoop, we got a growl and all that. So that was right off the bat when we first got to where we were going. But the night that I was by myself, I got there, and I was sitting on the back of my tailgate, and I sat there for a couple hours by myself, just quiet, wasn't making any noise, just listening and stuff. And I didn't hear anything. So I was like, it's kind of quiet. So I was like, I'm going to do a couple yells and do some whoops and stuff. And I did some whoops. And I usually carry around a couple 2x4s that I use for tree knockers. And I ended up running off and leaving them. So I actually stopped at a truck stop and got one of the tire thumpers, one of the wooden tire thumpers that the truck drivers use. And I'm like, I'll use that as a tree knocker, So I did a couple tree knocks and didn't hear anything. And I did a couple whoops, didn't hear anything. I did a yell, didn't hear nothing. So I sat there maybe about 30 more minutes or so. And I'm like, I'm going to do one more yell. And I said, I'm going to leave. It's just quiet. So I did a real long howl. It's probably about a 10-second howl, probably 10 or 12 seconds. That's about all I can get out. I can get a good one about 10 or 12 seconds long. Anything more than that, it kind of hurts my sides and stuff. So I did the howl, and a couple seconds later, I heard a return howl, and it sounded a pretty good little ways away. It sounded probably a mile or more away from me. And I'm like, well, hey, there may be something here. Maybe I'll just stay around a little while longer. Maybe it just hadn't made it down this way yet. So I do a few more knocks and a few more whoops. Didn't really hear anything. And then about, I don't know, probably about 35, 40 minutes, I'd sit there again. And I did another howl. And right away, within a couple, 2 or 3 seconds, I heard a return howl. And this time it was much closer. I'd say it was less than a half a mile from me. I'm like, okay, good. It's getting closer. I said, so I'll just stay here a little while longer, And I started doing some more tree knocks and do a couple more whoops. And I'm sitting there and, I didn't hear nothing. I'm like, well, it's got to be close. Cause I figured, it's got to be really close to me now as long as it took for it to get there. And I did like a home run knock with that tree thumper. And I actually broke it. I hit it and it broke in about 3 or 4 pieces. And I'm like, are you serious? And all of a sudden I heard I really can't explain the sound. It was kind of, I can't really tell you if it was a grunt or if it was like a huff, but like I heard, huh, and like I actually felt it, it was close enough that I felt the vibration from it. It had quite a bit of power from it. And when it did that, I just completely froze. I was like, holy crap. It's like really, really close to me. If I felt it, I'm like, it's got to be really close. And I sat there and I was just as quiet as can be. And I always had my gun on me. I would never fire at one unless I thought that my life was actually in danger. But I sat there and I was scared to death. All the hair on my arms and my neck was standing up. And, I was scared crapless. I won't lie to you. I'm sitting there by myself. I'm like, why am I out here by myself, And I sat there for a little while longer and I never do hear anything else, And I'm like, all right, good. Maybe he realized that, hey, this is a guy out here making noise. I'm not interested anymore. So I sat around for probably maybe another 10 or 15 minutes. And finally I was like, you know what? I'm going back to the camp, So I go back to the camp, and it's getting kind of late. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to stay by the fire for a while longer because I built a little bit of a fire before I left. So I put a couple more logs in it and stood around the fire probably, or stood. I sat around the fire probably for another, maybe about an hour or so. And this is probably midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, something like that. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to bed. So that night it got down to probably, I'd say 42 degrees. I think it's what it said it got down to. It was a little chilly. I was inside my sleeping bag and I went to sleep and everything. And I heard this noise and I looked up, like when I woke up just out of sleep. And I usually don't wake up out of my sleep too often unless I have to pee or something like that. But something woke me up. I don't know if it was a noise I had heard or exactly what it was, but I just laid there, pretty silent. And I kept hearing something fumbling around outside. And the way I was laying, my cooler was to the right-hand side of me. I was laying kind of parallel, laying parallel with my cooler, and it was at the edge of the wood line. And I keep hearing something, and it sounds like something's messing with my cooler. And I've got one of the igloo coolers. It's pretty much, it's like a knockoff of the
Yeti.
The Yeti, yeah, it's a Yeti knockoff. Yep. It's got the little rubber straps that you pull down and go up underneath the thing. So I keep sitting there and I keep hearing, I'm like, that's my darn cooler out there. It's like something's messing with my cooler. And I'm laying there and all of a sudden I hear my cooler open. And I'm like, wait a minute, there's something in my cooler, So I'm basically laying there and I'm like, and I say it out loud, not real loud, but I'm like, what the hell's going on out there, And I start fumbling for my gun because I had my gun inside my sleeping bag. And I fumbled around, I found my gun, and I found my headlamp. And when I was sitting there fumbling around for my my gun on the left-hand side of me, the opposite is my cooler, I'd say probably 20, 25, 30 yards, maybe 20 yards from my tent, I hear a whistle. And as soon as I hear the whistle, I hear my cooler lid fall. The cooler just falls. And I just sitting there laying, I'm looking out with my light. I don't see anything. I can't really see that good because of I had my fly on the tent and stuff. So, I mean, I really couldn't see too far I couldn't actually see where the cooler was at from my tent, but I could see close to where it was at. And I looked around with my light shining around. I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything. I never did hear anything leave, but I heard my lid fall. And I laid there for probably 30 or 40 minutes, probably, I'd say, and then I ended up falling back asleep. Well, the next morning when the sun come up, I usually when I'm sleeping in the tent and stuff like that, as soon as the sun comes up, I start getting up. I start stirring. So I got up and went over and looked into I seen my cooler was open. The little rubber straps had actually went inside my cooler. So it actually kept my cooler about 6 inches open. It wasn't all the way closed. And I'm like, I'll be damned, there was something in my cooler. So I opened up my cooler and look around, and in my cooler, I had all kinds of stuff in there. I had bacon, I had sausage, I had eggs, I had some cheese and stuff like that, and I had some bread, and I had a box of those Johnsonville grillers. They're like the little cheeseburger kind. It was the ones that I had were actually bacon cheeseburger. Well, it wasn't cheeseburger. It was bacon and cheese flavored, and that box of Johnsonville grillers were gone out of my cooler. And I'm like, are you friggin' serious? I was like, that's my lunch is gone. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. It's like, so I don't know if the whole me stirring around and then the whistle, I guess maybe it didn't have enough time to get everything it was after and it took off or whatever. But that's the only thing that was missing on my cooler was just that unopened box of Johnsonville grillers. And I'm thinking to myself, are you friggin' serious? So it was kind of funny. I kind of laughed at the whole thing, and I'm like, that's pretty darn good. He took my lunch, and I got to looking around because me being the curious person I am, I'm trying to see if I can find some footprint stuff. And right there where my cooler was at, it's actually the ground was pretty hard. We hadn't had rain in probably a week or so. The ground was pretty hard, and there were some rocks and stuff around it too. So I couldn't see any footprints or anything like that. Over where I heard the whistle at, I didn't see any footprints, but there is a couple game trails over that way. So I could see. I ended up finding a couple footprints out there. It wasn't like a Bigfoot footprints. I found a couple deer footprints. I think there was a raccoon, and I seen like a little possum. I seen look like a little miniature hands. I seen like possum print or possum prints and stuff, but I didn't see any like footprints. So that whole thing was kind of just kind of weird how it happened. It was just interesting. But we've had a lot of interesting stuff that go on out there at Land Between the Lakes.
Just to start out, the story was I went out by myself camping in the Land Between the Lakes.
Yeah,
that's crazy. But I do want to ask you. Okay, so it's only two things. It's either a person getting in your cooler or it's a Bigfoot. Okay, because it's not a bear, it's not even the raccoon or whatever, unless but because of the whistle, because not just because of getting in the cooler.
It takes lips to whistle.
yeah. So it's either a Bigfoot or a person out there, and I think here's what I find. Here's what I find really odd about the whole thing is I think a person would just take the whole cooler. They wouldn't mess around, okay? Which is crazy because if it was a Bigfoot, and they obviously know, I mean, if you're out there where people are camping and you know what these things are, you're watching people open them up, get stuff out, cook stuff, you're smelling it, okay? You understand what that is.
Yeah.
They're the ones that should be able to just pick up the cooler and take off.
Yeah, exactly.
Than a human, and it's kind of strange that they're opening it up and just like, okay, I'm gonna take this, and maybe they won't notice. That's the thing. It's just maybe they won't notice.
Yeah, that's kind of funny. And then at the same time, you think of people. Most people nowadays, is not going to come into somebody else's campsite, because you don't know if people have guns or knives or
wouldn't think
whatnot.
so. Yeah, you wouldn't think so.
And it's not, most people, it's not a very smart idea if people do it. I mean, I'm sure there might be people out there that's not very bright and might actually try that. But, most people nowadays have guns and stuff like that. And it's really not a good idea to be just coming in somebody's campground unrecognized, or unannounced, I should say. Because it's, somebody gets shot, so it's just.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. If you're that, okay, say you're this fugitive on the run and you're hiding out in the land between the lakes, okay, and you have no choice but to sneak up on somebody's camp, you're taking the whole cooler. You're not just rummaging through. You're like going, jackpot, I'm taking this.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I'll figure out what it is.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Now okay, so you're going to talk about a little bit about the land between the lakes. So what do you guys, if you're out there messing around and doing research, what do you guys think about the whole land between the lakes and Dogman and Bigfoot stuff?
Well, I'm not much into the Dogman stuff. It's like, I don't say that there's not nothing like that, but I prefer not to run into something like that. I can deal with the whole Bigfoot thing.
Yeah.
It comes to Dogman, that's another story. If I seen a Dogman, I probably would shoot first and ask questions later on a Dogman, just because every story you've heard of is always bad. You do hear stuff occasionally come up of Bigfoot, good things, good encounters. And me personally, I think they're kind of like humans to an extent. It's like you've got good humans, you've got bad humans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'd say probably, the biggest majority of Bigfoots are probably not going to harm a human. You hear the stories of people like, well, it chased me. Well, if it chased you, it would have caught you if it wanted to. First off, it chased you just to get you out of its area. Basically, it's like this is the way I take the whole thing. I think I believe they're flesh and blood. I don't know if they're partially human. Could they be partially a missing link from us? Yeah, I kind of think that maybe that they might be, because you've heard stories from the Native Americans where they used to take their women, and then a year or two later, that woman come back around. She'd been gone for a year or 2 years, and all of a sudden she comes back and she's not speaking and stuff like that. So could they have bred with humans? It's very possible, because I mean, there is some animals that can crossbreed, like, for instance, like donkeys and horses. But once those two breed, like the donkey and the horse, and you get the mule cannot basically breed with anything, but those two together can breed. So could that possibly be what's going on? Maybe it could possibly very well be. I think for the most part that most of them are fairly friendly. I think that we're their entertainment. We're out in their woods. It's their home, just kind of like, when you're out in the ocean, that's the sharks' territory,
Yeah.
So we're in their territory, and they're curious to see what we're doing. So I think that they come in to a distance and watch us, and they've been doing it for years. They see us. They see what we're doing. They see us with guns. They see us out there hunting, so they know what a gun is. They've seen us kill animals with guns, and they know what guns are. And I think that they might actually be even scared of guns, because, they see us killing deer, rabbits, squirrels, and everything else. So, but I think that most of the time, whenever you hear a story of Bigfoot, it scared me to death. Yeah, he did, because he was wanting you out of his habitat. Because if they could chase down a deer, there's no human that's going to outrun a Bigfoot. So if he chased you and he didn't catch you, it's because he was just trying to lead you out of his way. He was trying to, get you out of his area. And that's kind of what I really feel. And the ones that might be more aggressive, I think maybe they might have been shot at, maybe, or they've had a bad experience with a human. And that's the reason why that you might have more of the evil or the more malevolent ones, would be because we've done something to them to make them not want to be around us.
That's just, and that happens to humans too.
Yeah.
You see, it's the same thing. Most people go through their lives pretty happy-go-lucky, until something crazy happens to them. Then they start carrying a gun. Then they start, not going places. Their whole way of life changes a little bit because
Exactly right.
something drastic. So, I mean, if we think that they are um, sort of a branch on the human tree, then that would only make sense that some of their stuff's going to be human human characteristics are going to
Yeah,
be, some of what we do. So,
yeah.
so what else are you guys, encountering out there, or what else have you guys encountered as a group?
Probably the weirdest one I've had out there at LBL. Like I said, there were 7 of us. My son was actually with us that day, and I'm wanting to say he was probably 14 or 15 at the time. I think he was 15 at the time, and he really don't believe in the whole Bigfoot thing. He just went out there to humor me, and
What a kid! I mean,
but
I
it was
mean,
the whole thing was funny because like I said, I always pack my gun. My pastor Donnie, he's always got his gun on him, and like I said, uh, it was Lindsay and Charlie from the KBRO, and then it was my pastor Donnie, one of our friends Don, and it was myself and my son. We were all out there, and like I said, as soon as we got to the spot where they had a Class A, sighting or whatever, and Charlie was telling us about it. But no sooner than we got there, he actually told us the story beforehand before we went out there. And we drive out there, and like I said, we drive down those couple creeks or whatever, and we get to where we were at. And as soon as we got there, we started hearing some strange things. Like we heard a howl of some kind. We really don't know what kind of howl it was, but we heard a howl. We heard whistles. We got growls. We actually got whoops, and all that stuff was all going on at night. And one of the things that we were doing is like, normally when we go out in a group like that, we usually use red headlamps. That way we don't kill our own night vision and stuff like that. I normally carry a real bright white flashlight with me too, just in case. Uh, but I usually use red headlamps, so that way I don't really mess with my night vision. But we were doing the whole inchworm like kind of routine basically. There was, like I said, there were 7 of us, so 4 of us stayed together, and a group of 3, like the 4 that stayed in one spot, we had our headlamps off. We weren't making any noise. We were just sitting there, and the group of 3 with the headlamps went up the road about 10 minutes, and then they would stop. Then they would turn their lights off and sit quietly, and then we turn our headlamps on and then come up to them and meet them again, and we would keep doing that the whole length of the trail that we were on. And sometimes, they might get confused because they see a group of you, leaving, so they think maybe all of you left.
Hmm.
So we're hoping that way maybe we might actually get to see something or hear something that the other group doesn't hear. So we did our little thing down the one way, and we did our way back, and that's the time we were going to the cemetery. And we were going down through there, and we had heard, like I said, we had heard some whoops and howls. We heard a couple growls. A lot of times when you hear the growls stuff, that's kind of eerie feeling because you don't really know what it is. And like I said, the red lamps, you really can't see way away from you, but you can see a little bit in front of you. And we were headed toward the cemetery, and right before we got to the cemetery, we heard this huge home run knock. I mean, it was a loud knock. I mean, we did a knock before, a small knock, and we didn't hear anything right away. And then we started walking. And then as we started walking, then we heard that loud home run tree knock. And then we all stopped where we're at. And like, Charlie's like, "Did you hear that?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I heard that good," And we're sitting there within 10 seconds of all this happening, we hear a crunch, kapoom. A tree had fell. Do trees fall in the wild? Yes, they do all the time. Could it have been just it fell out of nowhere? Yeah, but it was kind of odd that it happened within 10 seconds of a home run tree knock. So we kind of feel that there was a tree that was pushed over, letting us know, hey, I'm here. And right after that happened, it went totally silent. We never did hear anything else the rest of that night. We had actually drove back to the campsite that night. The group of us, Charlie and his wife, was in their own truck, and then all the rest of us, we were in my pastor's truck. And we were ahead of Charlie and him. And while they were driving, Lindsay was shining. She had a real bright spotlight, and she was shining out into the woods. And we actually lost them at one point. We didn't see them, so I guess they had stopped, and they had actually seen some eye shine, and they had stopped and was checking out the eye shine. And they sat there for as long as they could, and then they finally turned around, and we all come back to the campsite, and we had all sat out there. And so that was probably the most interesting thing that happened that time. At that time, like I said, the whole cooler thing was kind of interesting to me. It kind of had me through for a loop. But we've had some funny things, and like my mom, I was telling you a story too about my mom. We went to a place that's called Pond River, and it's you have to actually have a stamp to get out there because it's actually owned by the coal company. So you have to buy a stamp to actually go out there on their property. It's like $15 a year for the stamp or whatever. So, I always get my stamp every year. So that way I go out there, and I don't really do a whole lot out there, but I taught my mom into going out with me, and she don't believe in Bigfoot either, so it's kind of funny. We take her and we take my dog Sadie, which is a 145-pound Great Dane.
Holy smokes.
So my mom's sitting there with her. She's walking with her, and she keeps trying to take my mom out into the woods. My mom's like, "We're not going out there. Quit, Sadie." She keeps pulling or whatever. And I'm sitting there trying to get I was like, I told my mom, I was like, while we're out here doing this, because we was just going to sit around the fire or whatever. And I was like, I'm going to put some fish poles out. See if maybe I catch some fish while I'm here. Get two things with one stone, throw one stone, get some fish, and maybe, get some Bigfoot sightings too. So I'm sitting out there trying to get these hooks and stuff all set up on my pole. And my mom's like, "Frank, what is this?" I'm like, "What's a what, Mom?" She said, "Come over and look." I said, "Well, wait a minute, Mom. Let me get these hooks and stuff on my fishing pole." So I get all that stuff done. I get them baited and everything. And I walk over, "What's what, Mom?" And I walk over there and look. And there's this huge footprint. And I didn't have my phone on me that night. My mom, she had a flip phone, so her camera isn't really worth a crap. But I didn't have my phone with me that night. For some reason, I didn't take my phone with me. So she's like, "What is that?" And I was like, "What the hell does it look like, Mom?" I said, "It's a footprint." She said, "That's an awful big footprint." And I started laughing. She said, "Who'd be out here walking around barefoot, Mom?" I said, "Mom, think about it. What am I out here for?" She said, "Oh, hell no, I'm ready to go." I said, "What, Mom? It's just a footprint, And it's kind of funny because it was actually headed toward the river, which me personally, I call it a creek. I don't really call it most of the time I don't call it a river because it ain't probably 20 foot wide. So to me, that's not a river. That's a creek. And I'm like, "Come on, Mom." I said, "We're here already anyway." I said, "Let's do some fishing." She's like, "No, I'm ready to go." I said, but the footprint was actually headed toward the river, and there's glass and stuff all around it and stuff, because people come out there. Sometimes people come out there and they drink beer and stuff, and you'll see shotgun shells out there and stuff where people come out there and they throw their bottles, shoot them with the shotgun, stuff like that. So I mean, there's glass and stuff everywhere. There's hooks and stuff everywhere. So it wouldn't be a real smart idea to be out there walking around barefoot in the first place out there. But my mom, just her expression, she's like, "I'm leaving." I was like, "How you leaving?" "I got the keys." She said, "Oh, you're gonna give them to me." She said, "Me and Sadie's gonna get in the truck, and if something comes, we're just gonna leave you here." I said, so we end up actually leaving or whatever. But that happened on a Saturday. Okay, so the next day, I get to church early. I usually get to church about 8:00, 8:30, and church don't start till 10. So usually me and my pastor, we'll sit there and we'll talk Bigfoot or something, we'll talk about something interesting, something that's going on interesting anyway. And I told him what had happened, he said, "Would you get a picture of it?" I was like, "Well, no." I said, "I didn't have my phone with me." And I said, and I said, "I don't carry nothing, with me to do like casts or anything like that." He said, "You ain't got no plaster?" I said, "No." I said, "I don't have any of that stuff, So we were sitting there talking. He goes, "Well, I've got some in my truck." I was like, "Oh, you do you?" He said, "Yeah." So he went out to his truck and he had a bag of plaster. He said, "All you do is put you a half of a bottle of water in here and shake it up real good." He said that's just enough plaster to make you a decent sized cast, So I was like, "Okay." I said, "I'll tell you what." I said, "When I get out of church today, I'm gonna go back over there and I'm gonna cast that print." I said, "Well, how long does it take for this stuff to dry?" And he said, "Yeah, probably a couple hours." He said, "Depends on how wet you get it, If you don't get it as wet, it might dry a little faster." But he said, "I got to go over Monday anyway and deposit the church money." He said, "I'll go over there and I'll dig it up for you." He said, "If you want to go ahead and cast it," he said, "I'll go over there Monday after I get done with the bank and I'll go, dig it up or whatever." So I'm like, "Okay, cool." So he gives me the plaster, and I go back over there after church, and I pull up, and there's a friggin' dad and a mom and 3 kids there, and they're putting their boat in. It's like a little boat ramp right there, so they launch their boats, and the kids were running up and down the edge of the river, you know. And I'm like thinking, oh man, this ain't good. You know, they're up there running all around over in that area, and I don't say nothing to them. I just sit there kind of, and they finally launch the boat, and the dad comes up there and parks the trailer, and the mom's already in the boat, so she yells over the kids to get in there, and they get in the boat, and they going on down the river a little bit, and I'll let them get out of sight, and I go over and start looking around for that footprint, and I found the footprint, but it had a bunch of footprints in it from the kids running up and down through there, so like you could barely see a little bit of the toes. I'm like, are you serious? So I actually took a picture of it, but you couldn't make nothing out really, because like I said, you know, the kids had been up there running around there playing, so I was like, darn it, man. I was like, I lost my chance. I could have had me some, you know, had me a cast and stuff, and turn around, and you know, that happened. So I was like, man. But at that same river now, we've had one of the guys that is actually, he's the associate pastor for the church that I go to. He's got a few Hispanic guys that work for him, and they were asking, you know, where they can go get some catfish at. So he was telling them, hey, go down here to this, you know, this spot where we were at. He said, man, you'll catch all kinds of catfish down there. And they've been going down there for a couple weeks straight, and they were just killing the catfish down there. I mean, just, you know, boatloads of catfish these guys were pulling out from down there. So like a couple days later, you know, he runs into the guys there taking their lunch or whatever, and he asked them, you know, how y'all doing on catfish? He said, oh, we got to find a new spot. And then, what do you mean you got to find a new spot? He said, oh, we're not going down there no more. And they never would tell him why they wouldn't go down there. And then Donnie was telling him, hey, there's actually been a few sightings there where actually people were fishing and gotten run off there from a Bigfoot. So, and he had told that to him, and see, he had actually had a sighting when he was younger, him and one of his friends, and they actually chased it with a rifle, and it actually jumped in the water, not there at that place there, but it was out at the stripper pits, out at these lakes and stuff where they fish at. And he said that they actually had one run and jump in the water, and they were waiting for it. They're like, when it comes up, start shooting it. And they said they sat there and they never did come back up out of the water. So if it swam all the way underneath the water and just stayed close to the water and they didn't see it or what, but he's actually had a sighting himself. So those guys won't go down there to fish anymore, to say the needless to say. But you know, we had that, and like I said, there've been a couple of reportings right there of people getting run off. And my pastor and us, we always go there a lot of times. And what we do when we go there, at that place there's really, I really wouldn't want to get around and walk around down there because the water's usually always up. So I'd say I ain't for sure, but I'd say there's probably quite a few water moccasins and all that stuff around there. So what we do is we normally just take our lawn chairs out. We'll make a little fire. And something I like to do to help maybe even bring them in is when I go out there, I bring my little grill, a little camping grill, and I actually cook burgers and brats and stuff like that. And
you got to cook the Johnsonville. Got to cook the Johnsonville things.
Well, I didn't have those at the time, but yeah, a lot of times I'll sit there and we'll actually sit there and cook burgers and hot dogs, and we'll sit there like we're sitting there, you know, and we'll do our investigation, but we'll sit there and we'll talk. We'll cook burgers. We'll laugh and joke around and carry on. One thing we haven't done yet, which I've been trying to get him to do, is bring his guitar out, maybe play the guitar. Maybe we can bring one in with a guitar or something. But one night we were down there, and it was really cold that night. We were staying pretty close to the fire. It had sprinkled just a little bit, but it wasn't really raining. It was just kind of a little light sprinkle, and then it stopped. Well, we were down there, and we'd been there probably about an hour, but we kept getting whistles. And whistles on both sides of the river. Like we get a whistle on this side of the river, then there'd be a whistle on the other side of the river. Then there'd be a whistle on this side of the river the opposite way, and then there'd be a whistle on the other side. And it just kept going back and forth. And Donnie just started laughing. And he's like, I ain't never heard nothing like this before, brother. And there's only one way to get out there. I mean, you can, unless you go down the river. If you come down the river, you know, you can come down that way, but there's only one road that goes back there. So, and you're back there at the lake, it dead ends at the lake. So there's nobody out there at all. And we keep getting, like I said, we keep getting multiple whistles on both sides of the river. We probably had 30 whistles probably within an hour, hour and a half. We had sat there, and I kept hearing a noise, and I had my parabolic mic. And Donnie has one of the, I don't know if it's a first or second generation FLIR, one of the older FLIRs. His doesn't do voice or pictures, but it records. And I had my parabolic mic, and I had my recorder going, and I kept hearing something, you know, over off in the woods. So I told him, hey, I'm gonna get up and walk over toward, you know, the edge of the river or whatever, and I'm gonna walk down the river and see if I can't, you know, listen to anything, you know. So I'm walking down the edge of the river, and I keep hearing something off to the left of me, like over in the woods. And I'm pointing my mic that way, and I'm looking straight ahead. I'm walking straight ahead. I'm looking to the left, and I'm looking over toward the water, but I got my parabolic mic pointed the opposite way. Well, I get probably maybe 20 or 25 yards from Donnie, and people, like, there was something thrown in the water next to me, and it was loud. I mean, it was really loud. And I didn't even have my parabolic mic. I didn't have my headphones on. I had the one on the one side, and then on my right hand side, I didn't have the right hand speaker on, so that way I could actually hear everything else. And I had the actual mic itself turned, not my mic turned down, but I had my actual speaker turned down, so I wasn't actually listening through my speaker, but I was still recording. And there was something that threw in the water next to me, and it sounded like a refrigerator, literally a refrigerator landed right next to me. The water actually got a little bit of water splashed up on me. And this is the first actual incident I've ever had. And it scared, I'm gonna try not to do any cussing, but it scared the crap out of me. And I never let my pastor I try not to ever let my pastor hear me cuss. I always try not to cuss around him, you know, the best I can. I'm a truck driver, so I do cuss a lot. So I try to keep it clean, you know. But I started backing up real fast, and I almost run over him. He's sitting there getting out of his chair because he jumped up because of this thing, and I almost walked into the fire. And he stops me. He grabs me to keep me from walking into the fire, and it spooked him too. Like I said, because he jumped up really fast, and he was looking in the water, and he was looking. He could see the ripples and stuff where whatever it was splashed, and he's looking in the water. He's looking for maybe like a tree limb or something like that. Maybe he thought maybe a tree limb or something had fell. Well, nothing ever surfaced. And we've had people say, oh, it was probably a beaver, which there is a beaver there. I will admit that there is a beaver there. But this thing here, I heard it hit the bottom. It wasn't a beaver. I've heard a beaver smack the water, and it will scare you, especially if you're out there by yourself and you don't know what's going on. But it wasn't a beaver, and it wasn't a fish. But I actually literally heard whatever it was hit the ground, you know, in the water. I heard it go plunk, and I heard it hit the ground. So whatever it was, I don't know if it was a rock or what it was, but like I said, it was really loud. And like I said, it scared the snot out of me. Like I said, I actually said a word that I shouldn't have said in front of the pastor, and I almost run over him. And he's, like I said, he looked over there everywhere, and he looked around. He never did see nothing. And then later on that afternoon, or later on that night, it wasn't too long after that we ended up leaving because everything went quiet. Right after that happened, everything went quiet. We didn't hear any more whistling or nothing like that. And it started to rain a little bit, so we're like, all right, it's time to go. So we left. We put the fire out on the left. And then I asked him, I was like, well, did you look up over here to the left of me, up here over into the woods? He said, no, I never did look over that way. I said, you never looked over that way at all? He said, no. He said, I was looking over on the other side of the river, and I was looking in the river and stuff. He said, I could see the ripples and all that, but he said, I didn't see nothing other than that. But he never looked to the left of me. And I had, before me and my mom went there, and that's when I actually found this out, because I didn't know this at the time, because usually the water is always up there, so you never can see what's over there. Well, that same day that me and my mom was over there, I walked up through there, and the water had been down. We hadn't had rain for a while, so the water was down. And I walked past where that rock had went in front of me or over beside me in the river. And I walked in front of me, and up in front of me, there was actually a ditch. And it was probably 6.5 foot deep, this ditch. And it still had water in it at the time. This time here it did. The time that we went there, it was probably water was in it pretty good. So if there was something standing there, it was, you know, more than waist deep in the water or more. And I told Donnie about that. I said, "Did you know there's a ditch up there?" He said, "Do what?" I said, "Up in front of us up there." I said, "I've never been down here at daytime, so I never knew what it looked like." And he said, "No." He goes, "There's a ditch up there." I said, "Yeah." And I said, "I think what had happened was, I think when I was walking up through there with my parabolic mic, I was getting too close to it. I think it was in that ditch in front of me. And I think what happened was it threw something over beside me to get my attention away from it. And it worked, because whenever it splashed down, I was back 100 mile an hour backwards, So me personally, I think there was something in the ditch, and I think it was just trying to get me away from it. It was trying to get its attention, my attention away from it. And like I said, it worked, because like I said, when it did that, I was backpedaling backwards. So, but like I said, we've had a lot of cool stuff like that happen. And I've been on a lot of expeditions with Charlie. He does expedition. He does fall, and he does a spring expedition and a fall expedition every year. And 2 years ago, one of the places that we went, we have a group area where we all every night they have a guest speaker and stuff, and they provide dinner and stuff like that for the price of all the stuff that you do. You get breakfast and dinner every day that you're there. And every night we all sit around a campfire up there, and we talk. We talk and stuff. We tell about the night before, what happened. Like basically we have a note taker. So like while we're out there in the woods and stuff, like people say, "Okay, at this time I did a whoop," and they'll write it down. And then we all compare notes. That we make sure we didn't hear somebody else's, like say if I do a yell, they're like, "Okay, did you hear a yell at this time?" Like, "No, we didn't hear nothing." So, okay, they didn't hear me. And if somebody else is like, "Well, I heard something at this time." Okay, well, that wasn't me. So, but anyway, we were sitting there. This was on a Saturday during lunchtime. We had in the morning, we usually do the night before, we'll tell everything, what had happened and everything. And we all was just going our separate ways. Well, where we were at, one of the guys was up there walking around behind in the woods up there where we were at. And he happened to find a footprint, and it was down at the bottom of this hill. And like where the footprint was at, me personally, I couldn't see nothing. And he ended up casting that footprint, and where he cast that footprint at, I walked up the hill a little bit, and I walked up the hill a couple steps, and then I could see right over there where everybody sits at night. So if it was something taller than me, if it was a foot taller than me, it could sit there and watch you, and you wouldn't see it because it'd be like a foot off the ground. So if you was to see an eye shine, you'd probably think it was like a raccoon or something. You wouldn't think nothing of it. And he actually got that footprint, and that was pretty wild there too. And then one of also that same expedition, I think we had a guy that was he's in the military, and I won't say his name or anything, but he's in the military, and he does stuff for the government. He's a linguist, and he does stuff on the computers. Like he can listen to a sound, and he could put it through his little computer, and it could tell you what it is. It could tell you by the spectrum of the sounds, how many megahertz, if it's an animal, if it's a bug, and he can go through there and like pretty much he can like take the cricket sounds out. Like if it's a lot of crickets, he could take all the cricket sounds out and like isolate that stuff. And he was doing a presentation on sounds and stuff and calls. Well, we were out there doing he was doing his presentation, and he was playing. We had a loudspeaker and stuff, and he was like playing known Bigfoot sounds. And he played one of the Bigfoot sounds and stopped it. And it wasn't 1 or 2 seconds later, there was a call behind us as this was going on. We all heard it. We're like, oh yeah, listen, did you hear that? So it was kind of funny because, it actually responded to his call that he had on that speaker that he recorded. So that was pretty interesting stuff. So, I mean, we've had a lot of interesting stuff like that happen. Like I said, we found a few footprints and stuff like that. My pastor, he's got a footprint and a handprint. And like I said, me personally, I haven't got to get one yet. I'm wanting to get a footprint or something cast. At some point, I hope to get one, and I'm sure it will. I've been told that probably the best place to do it is in the springtime down at LBL, because they actually lower the water levels during the springtime, or during the wintertime, they'll lower the water levels. And during the spring, when you first get out there, before they let the water come back up, you can walk out there where the water is normally at and get good footprints. Because I'm wanting to say a year or so ago, somebody got 80 something footprints out of that little area not at the same area I was in, but it's another area there by LBL. And they actually found 80 tracks that they cast. Another group was out there, and they cast like 80 tracks out of that area. So
wow.
So I've been wanting to go back there in springtime and take me some stuff out there and do that, because somebody told me, like I said, I've always heard plaster and stuff like that. Well, somebody was telling me that the best stuff to use is actually this dental stuff. It's kind of pricey, but it's like the stuff that the dentists use for your cavities.
Yeah.
And you can mix that stuff up, and it's a lot. It ain't as brittle as the plaster, so you can like, you don't have to. You can be a little more hard on it, trying to dig it up and stuff. You don't have to worry about breaking it because it's a lot stronger. But it's pricey. But I can't remember what it's called, but somebody said that that's the best stuff to actually get. But I like to get a couple bags of that stuff and go down there in the spring and see if I couldn't find some footprints, maybe cast some footprints and stuff like that. And
well, definitely remember to take your phone too.
Oh yeah, I usually do. Like if I'm out Bigfoot, normally I do. For some reason or another, I run off and left it that day. But normally I always have my phone. Like I said, normally I'm not out there by myself. I'm not a chicken, but at the same time, I'm not stupid either. So normally I'm not out there by myself. Normally I have somebody with me, but like I said, that night there, I happen to be by myself, which I don't normally do that's like once in a lifetime thing to me, I'm not scared of the dark, but I tell you what, some of the stuff that goes bump in the dark, that's kind of, it's kind of a little bit scary when you're out there by yourself. Out there ain't nobody around and stuff, and you start hearing noises. You're like, oh crap, So that's not me normally.
well, Frank, I'm glad that we connected and that you came on and shared this stuff. You had a lot of great insight. A lot of great insight on your experiences out there and what you think. Some of the stuff may and may not be a lot of good food for thought that I think people listening can really chew on,
Yeah.
And I do hope that you don't go out by yourself anymore, because
like I said, normally I don't, brother.
Holy smokes, man.
I normally don't do that by myself. Like I said, it's kind of, if I do, I'm definitely gonna stay with my truck. I'm not gonna get away from my truck very far.
Yeah, I can't. And my hat's off to you guys that go out there and do that, especially in a place that's kind of legendary for crazy things happening, So, but I want you to get that footprint, and I want you to get a good thermal image, because I want to be able to have you back on and talk, see pictures and see video and talk about it. So,
I hope so.
My hat's off to you, man, and tell your pastor he's probably the coolest pastor I've ever heard of.
Oh yeah, he's a pretty good individual.
So, well, Frank, thanks again, and we'll stay in touch. And you know what? Good hunting out there. I hope you do get that footprint and the thermal image and more. And I do hope that you do not run into a dog man.
I hope not either, bro. Like I said, that's the one thing that scares me. I'm not so super scared of the Bigfoot thing. I wouldn't lie. If I seen one face to face, it'd probably be pretty scary. But I can deal with the dog, or I could deal with the Bigfoot thing. But the dog man thing, that's just one thing I don't want to put my head around, brother. That's just something that really creeps me out that I don't want no part of. Hope it stays on the other side of the river, or on the other side of the lake.
Amen. Well, thanks again for hanging out, and I enjoyed hearing your stories again, and just talking Bigfoot with you.
All right, brother.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the From the Shadows podcast. Until next time, never shy away from the darkness or what may be lurking in the shadows. We are out.
God only knows what's hiding